In 1846, on the basis of unexplained aberrations in the observed orbit of Uranus, the French mathematician Urbain Le Verrier posited the existence and position of a planet beyond Uranus, whose gravitational influence was pulling Uranus out of its calculated orbit. The new planet was immediately discovered in the predicted position by the German astronomer Johann Galle in 1846 and named Neptune after the god of the sea. In the ensuing decades, astrologers again gradually arrived at a surprisingly universal consensus on the principal qualities and themes observed to coincide with the new planet's position in natal charts and transits. Neptune is associated with the transcendent, spiritual, ideal, symbolic, and imaginative dimensions of life, with the subtle, formless, intangible, and invisible, with the unitive, timeless, immaterial, and definite, with all that which transcends the limited literal, temporal, and material world of concretely empirical reality, myth and religion, art and inspiration, ideals and aspirations, images and reflections, symbols and metaphors, dreams and visions, mysticism, religious devotion, universal compassion. It is associated with the impulse to surrender separative existence and egoic control, to dissolve boundaries and structures in favor of underlying unities and undifferentiated wholes, merging that which was separate, healing and wholeness, the dissolution of ego boundaries and reality structures, states of psychological fusion and intimations of intrauterine existence, melted ecstasy, mystical union, and primary narcissism, with tendencies toward illusion and delusion, deception and self-deception, escapism, intoxication, psychosis, perceptual and cognitive distortions, conflation and confusion, projection, fantasy with the bedazzlement of consciousness, whether by gods, archetypes, beliefs, dreams, ideals, or ideologies, with enchantment in both positive and negative senses. The archetypal principle linked to Neptune governs all non-ordinary states of consciousness, as well as the stream of consciousness and the oceanic depths of the unconscious. Characteristic metaphors for its domain include the infinite sea of the imagination, the ocean of divine consciousness, and the archetypal wellspring of life. It is, in a sense, the archetype of the archetypal dimension itself, the anima mundi, the Gnostic pleroma, the Platonic realm of transcendent ideas, the domain of the gods, the immortals. In mythic and religious terms, it is associated with the all-encompassing womb of the goddess, and with all deities of mystical union, universal love, and transcendent beauty. The mystical Christ, the all-compassionate Buddha, the Atman-Brahman union, the union of Shiva and Shakti, the Eros Gamos, or sacred marriage, the Conjunctio Oppositorum, the dreaming Vishnu, Maya and Lila, the self-reflecting Narcissus, the divine absorbed in its own reflection, Orpheus, god of artistic inspiration, the Muses, the cosmic Sophia, whose spiritual beauty and wisdom pervade all. Considered as a whole, these themes, qualities, and figures suggest that the name Neptune is both apt and inadequate in denoting a mythological figure embodying the planet's corresponding archetypal principle. On the one hand, central to the observed characteristics is an underlying symbolic association with water, the sea, the ocean, streams and rivers, mists and fogs, liquidity and dissolution, the amniotic and prenatal, the permeable and undifferentiated. In this regard, one thinks of the many oceanic and watery metaphors used to describe mystical experience, the all-encompassing ocean of divine consciousness, of which our individual selves are but, momentarily, separate drops. The ceaselessly flowing, all-informing Tao, whose water-like fluidity evades all definition. The primordial participation mystique of undifferentiated awareness. The mists of prehistory. The amniotic fetal and infantile state of primary fusion. The oceanic realms of the imagination. The fluid nature of psychic life generally. The flow and stream of consciousness, the influx of inspiration, the fog of confusion, drowning in the treacherous deep waters of the unconscious psyche, slipping into madness or addiction, surrendering to the flow of experience, dissolving into the divine union, the cleansing waters of purity and healing, melted ecstasy, and so forth. One thinks here, too, of Freud's reference to the oceanic feeling, a sensation of eternity, a feeling as of something limitless, unbounded, as it were oceanic, It is the feeling of an indissoluble bond, of being one with the external world as a whole. Equally relevant is William James's images of a transcendent mother sea of consciousness, with which the individual consciousness is continuous, and of which the brain essentially serves as a sieve or filtering conduit. On the other hand, in virtually all other respects, the original mythological character of the Roman Neptune and the Greek Poseidon, tempestuous, violent, belligerent, often ill-tempered and vengeful, thus resembling most of the other Greco-Roman patriarchal warrior gods, is deeply incongruent with the complex set of qualities and themes that have been consistently observed in connection with the planet Neptune, and that are more accurately reflected in the mystically unitive deities and archetypal figures cited. Nevertheless, as with Uranus's mythological association with the starry heavens and air, so also with Neptune's association with the sea and water. The name given to the new planet was indeed poetically accurate with respect to the mythological location and element associated with that deity, perhaps a reflection of synchronistic factors playing a role in the astronomer's intuition and choice of names. As with the period of Uranus's discovery in 1781, the discovery of Neptune in 1846 coincided with a range of synchronistic, historical, and cultural phenomena in the immediately surrounding decades, and more generally in the 19th century, that are distinctly suggestive of the corresponding archetype. These include the rapid spread of spiritualism throughout the world beginning in the late 1840s, the upsurge of utopian social ideologies at the same time, the rise of universalist and communitarian aspirations in both secular and religious movements, the full ascendancy of idealist and romantic philosophies of spirit and the imagination, the widespread cultural influence of transcendentalism, the new popular interest in both Eastern mystical and Western esoteric traditions, and the emergence of theosophy. Here, too, could be cited the rise of the recreational use of psychoactive drugs in European bohemian circles, the beginning of the chemical and pharmaceutical industries, and the invention of anesthetics. The invention and cultural impact of photography and the early experiments in motion pictures, as well as the new aesthetic spirit of Impressionism and Post-Impressionism, were characteristic of the Neptune archetype in its association with image, reflection, subjectivity, illusion, and multiple realities. The growing focus on the unconscious, dreams, myths, hypnosis, and non-ordinary states of consciousness in the decades after Neptune's discovery is also suggestive of the archetype. So also was the distinct collective emergence of a more socially compassionate humanitarian sensibility that was expressed in the public attitudes, social legislation, art, and literature of the Victorian era and the 19th century generally. The novels of Dickens and Stowe, Tolstoy and Dostoevsky, the abolition of slavery and serfdom, the movements and laws to limit child labor and other cruelties of industrial capitalism, the first laws abolishing capital punishment, the wave of foundings of societies for the protection of animals, the growing role of women in shaping social policy, the beginning of modern nursing through the work of Florence Nightingale, the spread of care for the sick and wounded in war, the first Geneva Convention, the founding of the International Red Cross, etc.